Dio mio, questo è un orologio più bello. Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso and welcome back. It's been about 3 weeks since I did my last video, so I've been really busy with work, but I'm really glad to be back, and what a watch to be back with. Today I'm talking about the new release from Geneva Watch Days, the Bulgari Octo Roma Worldtimer. And honestly, just looking at it, I can't help but say, wow, this is such a good looking watch. Let me know in the comments below what your first impressions are of it, just looking at it. I mean, in my view, I think it's a stunning looking watch, and it appeals to me a lot because while I love the Octo Finissimo, I think it's an amazing watch and an amazing exhibit of design and engineering. On my wrist, it just doesn't really work, and I think part of that is ironically because it's a bit too flat for my wrist, at least. I think the proportions just look off when matched up with my wrist, whereas when I've tried on the standard Octo Roma Solo Tempo, it does tend to fit better on my wrist, and I think a lot of that is down to proportion and this being a little bit thicker, or not really thicker because let's face it, this one's only 11.3 millimeters thick. It's not exactly a thick watch by sports watch standards, but being something that has a bit more normal thickness relative to its record-breaking brethren. But before I get to dissecting where this fits into the Bulgari collection, first we need to talk a little bit of history. Now, for the last few years, we think of Bulgari, we think of Octo Finissimo. But the first official Bulgari only Octo was released in 2012 as the Octo Roma. Now this was an evolution of the 2010 Bulgari Gerald Genta Octo by Retro, and that in itself traces its roots all the way back to 2005 when Genta first introduced the Octo line. And that in itself, you could argue, is very easily an evolution of his original octagonal design. Of course, we're talking about the Royal Oak. But in recent history, of course, it's a design that's been almost exclusively associated with Bulgari. And since 2014, when the first Octo Finissimo was introduced, the Octo collection has been almost exclusively about the Octo Finissimo, with very little attention being given to the evolutions on the standard Octo Roma line. However, I think all of that changes with this new Octo Roma Worldtimer. Now, Bulgari has already started putting in-house movements into its standard Octo Roma collection. You see that in the three-handers. And now we have the BVL 257 made in La Sentier by Bulgari for this new Worldtimer. On paper, the stats aren't crazy, 42-hour power reserve with a proper Worldtimer though. But the idea here isn't to impress you on an insane technical level. It's really about making this watch accessible, but still something special. And you see that more when you look on the outside. Now, the Octo Roma collection has actually been playing around with the whole differential finish angle on these very architecturally inspired, multifaceted watches for much longer than the Finissimo has. The Finissimo, if you remember, has majority been a more satin or muted affair, often coming in matte finish like in the sandblasted titanium, the original ceramics. Carbon, of course, doesn't really have much of a shine or a polish to it. And only recently with the ceramic and now the satin steel have they been playing a little bit more around with adding some differential finish on those surfaces to make them dance around. But with the Octo Roma, that was built into the DNA from the beginning, and you can see it here. You can see how it is still majority satin finish, but things like the intermediate links as well as some of the facets are polished just to give it a little bit more pop and a little bit more dimensionality to it. And then when you look at the dial, for starters, if you get the steel one, it's a beautiful sunburst blue, and that sunburst pattern actually extends out onto the bezel, similar to the way that it does on an Explorer 2. There's so many different details on this, and different facets and different things just to catch the eye. I think it's a beautiful execution. And then I like that they also played around with the cities on the Worldtimer ring. Obviously they have Roma there to not only highlight the name of the collection, but also Bulgari's Italian origins. They've changed a few other destinations as well to mark out areas where Bulgari has hotels or where they plan to have hotels in the future. So in a way, they're sort of future-proofing it, but also putting more of their overall brand DNA into the watch itself instead of going with something standardized. It's a similar sort of thing to what we saw with the 2019 Omega Aqua Terra Worldtimer, which replaced Paris with Bilbien because that's where Omega is based. These little details, I think, they really help to make watches much more special, less standardized. And at this price point, you definitely don't want too much standardization. But now we've invoked the Omega, we have to talk about the competitors for this Octo Roma. Now the Octo Roma sells for $8,350 US, so it does line up quite nicely with the Omega, which sells for $9,100. And the Omega has been getting a lot of popularity, especially in the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months, because then it's released, not too many pieces were actually shipped out. It's only recently in Facebook groups and forums and on Instagram that you're seeing more people take delivery of these, and it's getting a lot of popularity. The pre-owned prices have gone up on it as well, and it's a very good looking watch and a very technical, detail-oriented watch as well. From everything from that laser-bladed titanium plate that shows the world, the rest of the finishing on the dial, of course that familiar Aqua Terra shape, and the movement itself is much more technically advanced, you know, being META certified, COSC certified, anti-magnetic, silicone hairspring, 2 barrels and a 60-hour power reserve. On paper, it's a very different approach to the Bulgari. And another key competitor this would have would be something like the Breitling Aviator 8 Unitime, which harks back to Breitling's own history in terms of pilot watches, and of course their own Unitimes that were famous in the 1950s and 60s. And you look at the design, it's pushing more of that sort of vintagey feel. And on the inside, while it's not as technical a movement as the Omega, it's still very robust, has a 70-hour power reserve. It's based on the original B01. So again, it's a very different proposition. And one thing I like about this segment in general is, unlike divers or chronographs where you see a lot of watches that are all sort of following a formula, there's a lot of intercopying, for lack of a better way to put it. With these, you see a lot more originality. You know, you look at these are 3 watches that are made by 3 very large brands from different groups that all feature the same complication. However, they're totally different approaches. You have the Omega, which is much more technical, much more focused on the details. You have then the Breitling, which is much more vintage evocative, going after nostalgia and being much more focused on being robust versus necessarily technically advanced. And then you have the Bulgari, which is really harking back to that Italian style and flair and a lot more elegance than the other two. This is something that could be much more of a dress watch, whereas the other two could be focused more on being a tool watch. But they all have over 100 meters water resistance, 150 in the case of the Aqua Terra. They're all priced similarly, but totally different approaches. And that's not something you see that much in a lot of other segments of sports watches. And I think that's because Worldtimers in general aren't the most popular complication, so there's less of a formula to follow and thereby copy from others, so it allows these companies to have more free reign and create a concept that they like. But for my part, I love this watch, and the Octo Roma is really something that's going to have me thinking, because I originally actually have been looking at a Unitime for quite some time. They do have some pretty good prices on the pre-owned market, but this Octo might just tempt me out of that. I have to see. In any case, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the new Octo Roma Worldtimer, and what do you want to see from the Octo Roma collection in the future? And also, most importantly, if you had to choose between the Octo Roma or the Breitling Unitime Aviator 8 or the Aqua Terra, which one would you pick and why? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures and infographics of watches as seen throughout this and all my other videos, then make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. If you want to see more videos of watches, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. In any case, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.